Hello folks, I'm Fonze. Since making some videos for the Doom app for Android, Delta Touch, quite a few people have asked for some help setting up a server to play some multiplayer Doom on their phones. So naturally, I slept on it for a long time and did nothing to further expanding the player base of my favorite game as any self-respecting Doomer would do. Honestly though, it's just not something I felt like I'd be able to do much justice. But I do think that this could be very helpful to quite a few people out there, so it's worth making at least something to help people get started. That said, time is a factor, and I haven't had enough to do all the research that I would have liked to have done for this. I still can't say I'm satisfied with everything I'll cover here, specifically the flags or server settings, which I'll get into later, but it should be good enough to at least get folks close to what other Doomers are likely to join in on and have fun with, as well as the types of settings they're likely to find in other servers. What I'm going to do first is show a quick example server with my preferred new school duel settings for those who just want to see stuff real quick and skip the long parts of the video. Then I'm going to fully set up a survival co-op server, and finally I'll show and talk a bit more about DM servers and settings at the end. Hopefully this tutorial can help folk get started and get familiar with the act of setting up a server, so that they can play some casual matches with friends or larger matches with other Doomers around the world. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Doomworld's Jimmy for allowing me to use these great tracks as background music for my videos. I'll likely start featuring a variety of these in future videos that need music. I'm also going to put a link to his commissions page on Doomworld, a link to his Patreon, and his SoundCloud as well in the description, so be sure to check those out and give him some support. He's a very talented artist and a major force of good in the Doom community. I have nothing but respect for the guy, so look into supporting him and helping him to continue to do all the good that he does. Another big thanks to the great people running the Sentinels Playground for this awesome free hosting service. Show them some support as well. The ability to automatically host a server is such a huge thing for multiplayer Doom, and the fact that it's free for everybody to use is amazingly charitable. That said, while this generous service is free for everybody to use, the service itself isn't free to run. And unfortunately, due to costs, recently tspg has had to downsize their server locations to just the US. Upon learning about this, I decided to become a supporter of their Patreon, and I highly encourage you to as well. If this is the type of thing that you would consider using, please consider supporting them so that they can continue to be there for all of us. And hopefully with more donators, can eventually get back to having servers in several locations around the world again. Even $1 a month adds up to big help, so please show some support and help to hold up this hugely generous service. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to Boloco, the dev for Delta Touch, for all that they have done in bringing multiple source ports to mobile, as well as being an amazingly charitable and good person. And one last thanks to Bethesda for the recent efforts at bringing classic Doom to a wider audience through their new official ports. To begin, the first step is to open your browser and head over to allfearthesentinel.net. There are other great server hosting clusters on the web, such as doomshack.org, but I'm not sure that any others are as automated as the Sentinels Playground, or tspg, allowing users to set up servers on demand. When here, start by making an account and logging into it. After logging in, on the left-hand side of the screen you'll see a box that says Host a Server. From here, you can start to set up the server to have the settings and WADs you'd like. The Load Config menu lets you load configurations you set up and saved previously here at the bottom of the screen. If you'd like to use any of the configs you see me use here, as well as configs hosted by other Doomers, you can select them in the Import Config menu. Either of these two will set you up with all the same settings, barring passwords and such for importing. I'll go ahead and load up my NS Duel settings now. This is going to be a really quick overview for those who don't need the rest of the in-depth info presented later in this video. Set up the General tab, server name, max connections, players, skill levels, lives, etc. Next, the WADs tab lets you select any custom WADs you'd like to load. Make sure you use all lowercase for the WAD name so the server will recognize it. Following that, you can set a map list if necessary. I won't get into DM flags yet because that's a large section to cover, but here's a quick look at what I got. Finally, make sure you set limits. You can set passwords, voting, and miscellaneous stuff in the next 3 tabs, but these are less important. You can save your settings at the bottom for quick use in the future, and you can host your server when you're ready. Congrats on making a server. From this next page, you can see the server info, including the IP address to share with folk. There is a hard cap on servers for each person as well as for everybody as a whole, so be considerate and make sure you kill your server when you're done playing. Moving on, if you're starting from scratch, this next section should help you get into the game with your preferred settings and less headache. I'll go through this by setting up a co-op survival server and then show the settings and such I use for some old school deathmatch. To start, you'll need to name your server, specify connections and players if applicable, set the game mode, difficulty, and lives, all things located in the General tab. After that, open the WADs tab, set your IWAD and the PWADs you'd like to load alongside it. Note when you do this to type everything out in lowercase. For a quick explanation of PWADs and IWADs, PWADs are patch WADs, which are basically any type of Doom data file that requires an internal WAD or IWAD to run. So an IWAD can run on its own, containing all the resources needed to allow the game to run, while PWADs are generally map or resource packs, mods, or a mix of them that run over an IWAD's normal resources, behaviors, or maps, so to speak. To put it another way, PWADs are loaded after the IWADs, and thus the resources in the PWADs are loaded after, which causes the engine to use those resources instead of the ones loaded previously. As such, when loading multiple PWADs, make sure that you load the most important and condensed resources last, so that any conflicting resources are resolved in a way that allows each mod to work the way you want it to. As an example, let's say you wanted to play the Wayfarer mod, but on the Faithless set of maps. Now, the Wayfarer comes with its own set of maps as well as being a mod, while Faithless is mostly just a set of maps. So if we were to load this up with Faithless first and the Wayfarer last, then we would wind up playing the Wayfarer mostly as is, since the resources in Faithless are overwritten by the Wayfarer's resources being loaded after them. On the flip side, however, if we load the Wayfarer first and Faithless last, then we would wind up playing maps from Faithless with the Wayfarer acting as a mod, since it would have loaded resources and modded stuff that Faithless doesn't overwrite. Also, I'd like to take a short second to note that there is actually just a mod version of the Wayfarer, with no maps included for this type of purpose, though I'm not sure that it is hosted on allfreethesentinel.net yet. Sorry if that was a bit long-winded, but to put it simply, generally load mods first and maps last. However, always pay attention to the order you load things in, because that will absolutely make a difference in the cases where multiple WAD files have conflicting resources. Also note that new text colors 260 PK3 is an auto-loaded WAD, and you'll need it to connect to the server that you make. After that, if you wish to specify a starting map or make a map list, you can do so in the next tab. The Flags tab is a very important tab, but also a very large and cumbersome tab to look through it and understand at first glance. This won't be a comprehensive list. I'm just going to go through a quick checklist of 10+1 flags to keep in mind for casual players, and then show my recommendations for a nice, comfy OS co-op survival game. It's like 10% extra on your order of a top 10 list, because I'm such a generous person and totally not given to indecision. Seriously though, to be honest, I still don't quite know what some of the flags do, and I encourage you to go look some of them up for yourself and familiarize yourself with the settings that you like to use. However, here are 10+1 flags good to know for casual players just looking to get in the game quickly. In the first tab, number 1, weapon stay. This makes pre-placed weapons stay on the floor when a player runs over them, so that other players can also pick them up. It's also used in almost every MP game mode, so it's very important to know. Number 2, item respawn. This will make items respawn after a period of 30 seconds. This can help prevent situations of one player hoarding all the supplies, dying like a scrub, and leaving everybody with nothing to work with. Numbers 3, 4, and 5. Jumping, crouching, and free look. Decide if you want to allow jumping or not. If you're playing a set of maps that weren't built with jumping in mind, keep in mind that it can break maps, and even if you don't plan on abusing it, other players who join into your game are likely to see if they can jump, and if so, proceed to jump anywhere and everywhere, and as a result, they may break a map you're playing by jumping somewhere the mapper hasn't accounted for. My advice is that you're the one setting up the server, so make sure you do it right. Though I will also say that ultimately, you should play however is the most fun for you and those that you're playing with. So decide on the jumping thing here. Likewise, with free look and crouching, both have the potential to break maps, though free look is also generally accepted. Number 6, losses on death. Original Doom would have you lose everything and start with just a pistol and 50 bullets. Here, you can decide if you want to replicate that, lose nothing, or something in between. Again, play the way that you have the most fun, but find those options here. In the third tab, number 7, keys shared between players. This is a really nice convenience thing to have, but also some maps may not let you get back to the pickup for a key after they have been grabbed once. So enabling this can also help to prevent a soft lock. Also, it's a fairly standard flag to enable for co-op play, right next to weapon stay in terms of importance. In the fourth tab, number 8, infinitely tall actors. If you're playing an old school map, it was probably designed with infinitely tall actors in mind. If you want to get to experience the map closer to its source, this is an important flag to set. On the other hand, most GZ Doom and Advanced Port maps are designed without this in mind, and thus should be played with this flag off. Pay attention to the map's format. That all said, your fun is what matters most, and not setting this flag is only a problem when it inhibits that. Number 9, monsters can't be pushed over drop-offs. I was torn between including this here or free aiming the BFG. Ultimately, this has more far-reaching consequences in co-op than the other, but both are important. Again, this is a map format type of thing, but pushing monsters off cliffs can take the teeth off turreted monsters, especially in old school and boom format or lower WADs. In the last tab, number 10, explosion radius has infinite height. If you play with infinite height actors, you also want this to be enabled. This makes explosions have infinite height as well. A common example for this is that if a monster far below or above you is blocking you, a rocket to the nearby wall will damage them even if you can't see them. And finally, for the bonus number 11, in the second tab, BFG free aim is an important thing to consider. Most maps are built without it in mind. Even with free look enabled, it is still generally a good idea to not allow BFG free aiming, given the power of the weapon and the way it works. Most deathmatches, even among those with free look enabled, do not allow this for a reason. That being that you could aim at the floor and insta-kill everybody else at your leisure with BFG. That all said, its impact on co-op is less severe than it is in a deathmatch, and ultimately as long as you're having fun, that's all that matters. So that's it for the top 10 plus 1 flags to look out for when creating a quick co-op game. These are the rest of the flags that I would recommend being familiar with for a more comfy experience. In the second tab, no respawn protection. Doom was built without this in mind, but if you find it more enjoyable to play with it enabled, you can do so here. Just keep in mind that it can vastly cool down those hot starts, which may not be desirable. Don't check ammo when switching weapons is good. This allows you to select a weapon even if you don't have ammo for it. It can also allow you to more quickly select a weapon pickup for when you want to try hard. In the third tab, if you don't want players or teammates to block each other, you can do that here. In the fourth tab, enabling wall running is good for old school maps that don't use 3D floors and such. Scrolling sectors are additive like boom can be good to use on some maps. Instantly moving floors are not silent, is important for anything not DM oriented. Sector sounds use original method for sound origin, will help triggers and stuff sound like they originate from where the map author intended them to. Use original doom heights for clipping against projectiles is good for old school maps. Minotaur floor flame is instant, makes it behave like it does in vanilla if you're playing a heretic type of thing. Hit scans use original block map and hit check code is good for old school fun, but will make punching more difficult as it is in vanilla. It'll also make chain gunners and other hit scanners hit you less. In the sixth and final tab, use Doom's original random number generator. The largest noticeable effect this will have is that your SSG will do more damage on average with this enabled, though of course it affects everything that uses the RNG table. This is also an important flag for DM. Use horizontal explosion thrust of old Z-Doom versions is another good thing for old school fun. Use old school Z-Doom jump physics is good for old school Z-Doom stuff, including modern WADs designed for Z-Doom with an old school feel. Limited movement in the air is how vanilla and old school ports play, so good for old school stuff. Finally, the map 01 plasma bump bug is good to know about if you find yourself actually playing a map which requires it, but probably shouldn't be used on new school maps. Sorry if that list dragged on for a bit, but if you stuck in there with me, then we're almost done. Limits are unnecessary for co-op games, so I'll skip that tab. You can set passwords in the next tab. Archon means remote console, and that's the password you set for admin access. Connect password is to be able to connect to the server in the first place, and join password is for people who have already connected to the server and are spectating to be able to join in and play. The next tab is voting stuff. And the final tab is additional parameters, where you can set additional rules and such. The last two things to do are to decide if you want to save these settings and to click the host button. From here, you can see the info on your server, including WADs and such, as well as the IP address, which you can then use to connect and share to others for easy finding and connecting to your server. And by the way, congrats on setting up your own server. A final thing to note is that you can only have 3 servers active at any given time, and everybody as collective only gets 250. So remember to kill your servers when you're done with them. Setting up a DM server is much the same as a co-op one, however there are a few small differences. I'll try to go through this all quickly. For this, I'll load up one of my configs. This is my config for some old school dueling fun on Delta Touch. As with co-op, start by naming your server, setting the max number of connections, the max number of players, the game mode, and the skill level. Deathmatch and duels traditionally play on Nightmare for double ammo given. Next, select your WADs. Again, this is case sensitive, so make sure you don't capitalize the first letter if you're on mobile. You can make a map list if you want in the Maps tab. For Deathmatch, some flags are considered mandatory, often separating types of deathmatches from one another, while others are house rules. For a good reference to these, check Decay's stickied post in the multiplayer section on Doom World titled Multiplayer Mapping: Thoughts on Designing Successful or Fun Maps. Most of this list are direct quotes actually from a previous article also written by Decay, to give credit where it's due, but most of the info is the same in the new article. I changed the ordering a bit, but again, check the source. The link is in the description. Doom multiplayer always utilizes the weapon stay DM flag, meaning weapons don't disappear on pickup. For old school DM and duels, Nightmare skill or the double ammo flag, no item respawn, no free look, no jump, strict air control, infinitely tall actors and explosion radius, preferred weapon order switching. More conservative OS servers may include automatic weapon switching, silent west-facing spawns, and no crosshair. For NOS, or New Old School, UV difficulty or no double ammo, items do respawn, free look enabled, no jump, and less strict air control. The rules for New School GM are generally contested, but these are the flags that I'm familiar with being a defining part of it. Nightmare skill, double ammo, item respawn, free look enabled. Some servers will have jump enabled and a high degree of air control as well. In my limited experience, most strictly New School stuff has jump enabled, but I defer to the greater experience of Decay on this stuff. Also, for the sake of completion, I'm just going to directly quote the section on CTF because I have little experience with it. I will also note that it has been taken out of the new article, so hopefully this info is still correct, but there is a large community of CTF players, so if that's your thing, I encourage you to go to the multiplayer Doom Discords and get involved. It can be a ton of fun, and there are a lot of great players over there. Capture the Flag standard is a mix of double ammo or Nightmare skill, jump enabled, item respawn, free look enabled, and strictish air control. Following the main few flags to set up for a given type of DM, these are some general flags to look out for when setting up most DM servers. In the first tab, always keep weapon stay on to keep things fair and fun. Kill anyone who tries to exit the level. You can vote as a group to change the map, but somebody being able to do it on their own out of rage or carelessness might really upset you when they do it on a great hard-fought match you've been playing. No monsters, of course, most of the time. Lose all inventory on respawn. In the second tab, double ammo, not necessary if you set skill to Nightmare. Turn off allow BFG free aiming always in every mode unless you want somebody to aim at the floor and wreck you constantly. No respawn protection. It may seem cruel at first to a casual player of modern games, but Doom was designed without and played without respawn protection since it was made, and this is especially true for deathmatches and duels. Chaining up spawn frags is a staple of Doom Deathmatch and even a skill Doomers work on. Turning respawn protection on would upset a lot of players and lead to less desirable and populated games. Doom has no gentleman's rules, and if you choose not to use something to your advantage, then you'll be at a self-imposed disadvantage or handicap to other Doomers who will use those things to their advantage. People can even use a respawn protection to their advantage, and it's not uncommon for Doomers to suicide in a deathmatch or duel just to prevent somebody else from getting a point for a frag. Doom Deathmatch is cutthroat and very fast-paced, but that's also what makes it unique, fun, and stand the test of time. Don't check ammo when switching weapons is another important but subtle flag to set for deathmatches. In the third tab, players should block each other. You can also set the game to not show medals if you want. In the fourth tab, pickups are only heard locally is important for deathmatches and duels, as others will use your pickup sound to their advantage, predict your timing around a corner, and blast you mercilessly. Limiting actors to only one sound enables the vanilla silent BFG trick, where you fire the BFG then immediately hit the use key on a wall or anything to cancel out the noticeable sound of the BFG powering up to fire, which is another Doom Deathmatch staple and probably one of the first tricks that new players will learn. Enable wall running for all but the newest school WADs. Sector sounds use original method for sound origin is good to make sure that sounds work the way the author of the map tested to keep things fair. Likewise, I also set sector-based sound target code to on, though that could be a mistake as I'm not 100% clear on what it does. I also use original Doom heights for clipping against projectiles, since I prefer the old school feel to things. Likewise, I enable hit scans use original block mag and hit check code. Once again, we can skip the fifth tab, and in the sixth and final tab, use Doom's original random number generator is good for all types of deathmatches. Even as somebody who prefers to use rockets over the SSG, it is still good to enable. The most noticeable difference it will have is that the SSG will do more damage, though of course it affects everything. You can also disable taunting here too. Additionally, for old school servers, you'll want in the sixth and final tab, use horizontal explosion thrust of old Z-Doom versions, use old Z-Doom jump physics, limited air control. Map 01 plasma bump bug is a very important flag to set for old school DM. And you can also find Silent West spawns here as well. After setting flags, you can then move on to setting the limits. Make sure you set limits for deathmatch and duel games. The first category is duel or match limit. Set this to 1 if you want to change maps after each round. Next is frag limit, which is the number of kills you get. Point limit is for CTF. Time limit is in minutes. And win limit is the number of wins per round. Following that, you can set your passwords, voting stuff, and any additional parameters you may want. Then choose whether to save your config and host the server. Again, you'll see all the info and IP address for your server. Congrats on setting up a DM server. I hope to see you in game at some point. Okay, that's going to wrap this tutorial up. If you've gotten this far, I'd like to thank you for watching. I hope this has all been helpful for you. Please leave any comments or questions you may have below, and I'll help as I can. If you'd like to show some support, you can like the video, but I'd be happier just to see more folk in the Doom community. Again, I'd like to throw out a big thanks to Jimmy for the middies, Beloco for Delta Touch, the folk at tspg for hosting Doom servers, the devs for Zand in bringing us this great multiplayer source port to play on, and to all of you that have watched this video this far. I hope to see y'all around in the community sometime. Cheers and take care.